I'm going to be talking today about some work that Ocean Visions led, which was an assessment of proposed approaches to slow the loss of Arctic sea ice. Many of you in the room participated in this work, so thank you for that. So, you've heard a little bit about Ocean Visions throughout your time here, and you might be wondering why an ocean organization is interested in Arctic repair. And hopefully, you appreciate that the ocean crisis is a climate crisis. These are interconnected, they are intertwined, and we cannot separate them. The ocean has done us an incredible service by absorbing 90% of heat energy from anthropogenic emissions, as well as absorbing 30% of carbon dioxide emissions. So, thank you, ocean. But also, we've placed this enormous burden on the ocean. And the ocean, as we've heard, is reaching tipping points in a number of different ways. Ocean Visions advances a strategic agenda to address this interlocking ocean and climate crisis that, really starts with thinking about reductions and ocean-based pathways for decarbonization. A lot of the work of the organization to date has focused on ocean-based pathways for carbon dioxide removal. And then I lead the program on repair, which is all about stabilizing critical marine ecosystems to avoid tipping points. And then the fourth R, which is sort of an overarching R, is reach, which is really about building global capacity to address these issues. And so, being here in community and attending events like this and really just trying to bring more people into this space is another large goal of ours. The central question of the repair program is what are all the possible pathways that could forestall devastating changes to critical marine ecosystems? And as an organization, we've chosen to address this question through an ecosystem lens. So we are, sort of zeroed in on a particular ecosystem at a time, and that began with thinking about Arctic sea ice. And I think we all appreciate here that rapid declines in Arctic sea ice are risking further destabilizing the global climate. Sea ice loss decreases planetary reflectivity, which increases heat uptake. Importantly, Arctic summer sea ice has declined 50% over the last 40 years. And summer sea ice is expected to disappear by the middle of the century under all emissions trajectories, if not earlier. Importantly, while summer sea ice loss itself is not considered a tipping point, summer sea ice loss is a predecessor to and an accelerator of Greenland ice melt and permafrost thaw. This figure here is showing you in red is the 2023 extent through time of sea ice in the Arctic, and pointing out, the average and the record high and the record low. And I pulled this figure off of the National Snow and Ice Data Center's website before I left California to come here. This is a similar plot showing you, the from January through December of a year, an extent of sea ice on the y-axis. Pointing out the dashed red line was the 2012 record minimum, and 2025 is shown there in blue. So already in 2025, in the winter time, which is when we would expect to see the maximum summer sea ice extent, it's been a record low. And I'm sure we're all eagerly awaiting to see what the rest of this year has to hold on so many fronts. So, yay! So we've been asking what, if anything, can be done to try to slow this loss. We have a set of principles that guide our work and kind of ground us in this work on marine ecosystem repair. There's the QR code if you're interested. These include things such as all proposed approaches require additional research, development, and testing to know their efficacy and their impacts. That we're not advocating for use and deployment of these approaches, but we are very, very interested in advocating for more research. That dialogues, governance, and research and development must include a diverse set of perspectives and expertise, and that developing research also requires developing governance. In putting together this product that I'll show you, we formed an advisory board of subject matter experts that were inclusive of a broad variety of perspectives. We had interviews and conversations with over 100 different experts from 13 countries. We performed a really extensive literature review that was not limited to the peer-reviewed literature, but also looked at lots of reports and pieces that are out there. We tried to develop a comparative framework to think about the different approaches. We held many webinars and engagement activities. We had a draft that was available for review. There was some targeted expert review as well as review from anybody who was interested. And then we received that feedback and then integrated it back into the roadmap. And importantly, this is never meant to be a published piece of information because it lives on a website as a living document that we actually constantly update. So there's ways for you to highlight text and provide direct feedback. Some of you in the room have done that, and thank you very much. And then we are also, tracking things in the field, and we make monthly updates to the roadmap. So the categories that we cover in the roadmap are Arctic protection. So we do cover some non-intervention strategies. So Arctic protection, as well as pollution management, which contains a variety of categories, including action on black carbon and methane, as well as carbon dioxide. And then the more intervention categories are ice management, so intervening directly with the sea ice itself, solar radiation modification, changing the amount of heat energy exiting or entering the atmosphere, and then surface albedo modification, the brightening of surfaces, particularly the ocean and sea ice. I want to point out that this illustration and the others that I'll show later are available on our website, and you are welcome to download them and use them in any of your communication materials if it's helpful for you. So if you go to the roadmap and there's a QR code for it, then you get these interactive bubbles of these 5 different approaches. And then if you click on a particular approach, then you get in, or excuse me, a category, then you go into the options that we have for each approach. It's indicated whether they're locally implemented or globally implemented. And then when you click through to a particular approach, you get the meat of the material is in the state of the approach, but there's also a big section on knowledge gaps, and then what we call first order priorities, which are tractable ambitious but tractable questions that need to be addressed in order to advance knowledge about an approach. And this isn't just about the science questions, it's also about governance. If you click through to the state of the approach, again, that's where most of the material lives. There's overview, potential technology readiness, co-benefits and risks, and governance considerations. And then once you click through into that section, then it looks more like this. Everything is extremely we have lots of citations, everything is hyperlinked. So it's really easy to go to the source of the information that we found. There's also definitions of each of the parameters and an explanation of what lives there. And then you can see here, there's this area that shows up that is how you would submit comments on the content. If we go back to the main page, there's this option to click on summary figures and tables. Those do not share well on a screen like this, but we did not score the approaches because we didn't place sort of, I guess, like value judgments on some of the different categories. But we do have some summary tables to try to collate some of the information so that you can look at them across. And just a summary of what those tables include. One is about the estimated impacts of approaches on sea ice. And so the categories are either continued sea ice loss, unknown impact, or sea ice maintained. Then there's a section that's comparison of approaches that includes things like temperature impact, technology readiness level, technical feasibility within 10 years. And this one's really important to us from a sea ice lens because, and this doesn't mean deployable, this just means at the level of a demonstration project, principal risks, and then there's a few other that are also included in that table. So I'm just going to walk you through with the illustrations for the different categories with some of the take-home messages. So Arctic protection, while urgently needed and very important to preserving Arctic ecosystems, is unlikely, though, to slow the loss of Arctic sea ice. So we need protection, but not for the purpose of slowing the loss of Arctic sea ice. For pollution management, I want to highlight that carbon dioxide emissions reductions are unlikely to slow the loss of Arctic sea ice. Methane emissions reductions are the most promising, and I would really love to see this whole group talking more about methane, like when you're having conversations about the Arctic with friends, colleagues, anybody, really, really driving home the importance of methane's emissions reductions because that is the low-hanging fruit here. Yes, methane people. It's the most promising. The others are really unknown. So black carbon action, really important, but not really known how it would impact the loss of Arctic sea ice. Emissions reductions and carbon dioxide removal have pretty high TRLs in comparison to the other categories of approaches. So, we need to definitely be all in on all of these things. For ice management, we've heard of some of the studies of ice thickening. There's also some studies about adding snow that do suggest potential to maintain sea ice. These other approaches that we've highlighted, blocking ice export, for example, are unknown, but really excited to see that there's going to be some research addressing that area. They have around a TRL4 or less, and all are technically feasible within 10 years. And there's already field studies happening, so that's great. For solar radiation modification, all of the approaches that we cover have some potential to slow the loss of Arctic sea ice. Um, we and the royal we, also the people that participated in the development of the material. So, I wrote a lot of it, but it was also in consultation with many of the experts. But estimated that SAI, MCB, both globally and Arctic, and mixed phase cloud thinning could be technically feasible within 10 years. Although, after Jeff's talk, maybe we need to add sunshades. Really curious to follow up and learn more about that. And that's a really good example of, the need to just keep this information up to date and to be checking in with all of you in the community. For surface albedo modification, there's some limited studies of geotextiles and sort of lumping these together, seafoams, films, and microbubbles that show the potential to maintain sea ice. But I want to highlight that there's many unknowns and there is some risks of toxicity. So we just need to think about what are these materials that are being proposed, especially thinking about like surfactants that would be added to bubbles, and just thinking about some of the toxicity implications. Some of the high-level findings, so 15 of the 21 approaches could move to demonstration projects in the next 10 years. Studies of 9 approaches out of that 21 suggest potential for sea ice maintenance or restoration. 2 had conflicting results and 9 were unknown. And importantly, so I kind of focused on more the technology side here, but we have an extensive section about governance, including existing governance frameworks, part about justice, a part about engagement with Indigenous peoples, as well as public perception. And there are substantial knowledge gaps concerning justice and governance for most of the approaches, and these really must be centered for inclusive and transparent decision making. Since I'm in this session of the way forward, I thought I would add a slide with some reflections. So I think one point, which we've heard echoed by others in this room, that scientists and communicators really need to be upfront about the risks that we are facing and the limitations of emissions reductions. There was a paper that came out earlier this year that hopefully most of you saw by Julianne Strove that speaks to what the future looks like for Arctic sea ice, permafrost, and Greenland ice sheet under the nationally determined contributions, which get us to like 2.7 degrees Celsius. And it does not look good for any of those things. And so I think just really, grounding ourselves in the reality and sharing that reality. Also, it will take a portfolio of approaches to mitigate and address climate impacts that's going to include reductions, removals, adaptation, and interventions. And a portfolio of interventions, I think we need to really sort of underscore that and think about, maybe the next step is for us to think about how some of these approaches work in tandem, where there are synergies, where there might be potential negative impacts of doing multiple approaches together, what that means on the governance stage. So I think those are really important things that we need to start thinking about. Next, that the field needs to grow across all sectors. So we need to be bringing more people into the room. I think it was Liam that pointed out early on that, where are the CI scientists? Where are the Arctic, ecologists? We need more people in this room. And then collaboration is key. We don't have enough time to be duplicating each other's work. And so I think really understanding, what we're doing, what questions we're trying to answer, and how we can try to work together to, move forward collectively. So what's beyond the roadmap at Ocean Visions? We try to do a lot of work around field building, so building networks, and happy to be connected to people here that we hadn't been connected with before, trying to increase inclusive dialogue. We're doing a lot of work to try to advance the first order priorities in the roadmap, which includes trying to put together a research framework that is trying to operationalize the American Geophysical Union's ethical framework for climate change. Increasing interdisciplinarity, which touches on the point I mentioned before, and importantly, trying to raise a research fund to support research into some of the first order priorities for some of the approaches. Here is a QR code for the sort of summary of what we're trying to do with this Arctic Sea Ice Restoration Research Fund. if you'd like to learn more about that. And here again is a QR code for the Arctic Sea Ice Roadmap if you would like to explore it further. And please reach out and feel free to contact myself or the others here. Brad Ack, CEO, is here, and Bridget Shaka, who works with me on the repair program, is also here. So, looking forward to being connected in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk, Kerry. And open the floor to questions. Okay. Can I throw it to you to throw to the... I can't throw that far, so can... All right.
Thank you. I'm Herb Simmons, Climate Emergency Forum and the Healthy Planet Action Coalition. I noticed on one of your first slides that you said you're for research but not deployment. And that seems to be the sort of standard for almost all of the NGOs and universities in this ecosystem. And I guess my question to you and by extension to this whole community is really sort of a question that begins with three words. At what point? At what point will there need to be advocacy for safe, what I would call safe and effective deployment of, of the portfolio, whatever that turns out to be, of interventions? And is there, I haven't come across, is there research and evaluation and development of criteria to help policymakers make the decision of when as well as how? So my question both to you, but by extension to everyone.
Yeah, I think that from the governance side of things, it's going to be, there's these questions that keep coming up, right? Like who decides, what goes into that decision-making criteria that, we don't, I don't think we're really making progress. Like policymakers barely know that these interventions exist, I think. And I'm really happy to see like the talk by Peter and Renaud talking about the climate intervention impact. Sorry, I'm going to mess it up. But seeing like, we need to study impacts. We need to know that things can be safe. And we need to help the researchers, especially who are doing some of the field studies, to show if they are safe or not safe so that people can feel confident about moving forward, I think is going to be really important. And, I think we've done really important work in the marine carbon dioxide removal field to try to like move things forward. We work on trying to accelerate permitting and try to see more research happening that can lead us to a point where we can make decisions. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Great. Thank you. Now we have a question from Pete.
Hi there. Thanks for the great talk. I guess the question I have is, we heard the phrase red team earlier. Do you think this is an idea where there's a lot of creative thinking going on, lots of new ideas bubbling up? Does there need to be a phase where ideas are winnowed down to the most effective or promising? And how much do you as Ocean Visions want to be involved in helping do that kind of to link together thinking on what's effective or not?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. I would say that, for example, with the Sea Ice Restoration Fund, we're not there's a limited amount of money, hoping to raise more funds, but, there will be some that we will choose to highlight more so than some others. There's some, and I think Fonger kind of mentioned this, that like for some of the ideas, it takes a champion. Like if somebody proposes an idea, but then doesn't actually want to work on it, then I don't really know what you do with that. I think the idea has to have someone that believes in it enough to put the effort in to work on it. So, so I think that's, one sort of way that already sort of winnows down some things potentially. Maybe there should be somebody looking into things, but I don't know that we're able to sort of track all of that as an organization. But I think that's an important question to think about. Yeah.
You have shown that one of the metrics is the sea ice extent in the winter, all year long. But your metric shows that the minimum was 2012. And in fact, there are two other important metrics there. Is the fact that the volume of sea ice is still reducing after 2012, and also the multi-year
Yep.
sea ice extent. So I think this can be improved because we say, oh, since 2012 it doesn't increase.
Yeah, so that was what we actually, when we were trying to summarize some of the informations and some of the approaches and find out what was available, it was hard enough to find approaches that even really addressed the sea ice impacts and what those might be. And extent was the thing that was used, that is the thing that we compared. But you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, like so many of the studies haven't gone beyond thinking about, just impact to sea ice extent, but appreciating that those other metrics are extremely important.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kerry. Let's clap for Kerry one more time.